Okay, hi.
Hi.
So here's my final internship presentation on the company I worked for called Hope Love Company. And it's essentially a nonprofit that supports young adults and children that are facing a connection to the ALS community. And if you don't know what ALS is, it's amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Try and repeat that back. But it's essentially a neurodegenerative disease that affects your motor function. So it kind of attacks your brain first. There's two areas where it hits mostly, and it's either you get bulbar onset, which means it attacks your throat, or you get limb onset. So the life expectancy for people that have ALS is around 3 to 5 years. People can live longer than that, but usually that is the process. And it can be really hard for little kids that are going through it because the average age that it's hit is around 40 to 60 years old. So a lot of them might have parents that are going through this or loved ones, grandparents. And it's a very unique disease where not a lot of resources exist for children and young adults. So I knew I really wanted to get involved in that. Is it the arrow?
I think it's only moving this Zoom thing for some reason.
Oh,
You have to click onto your presentation.
oh, okay. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. So I guess just about me, outside of what you guys already know about me, I'm a sociology major with a health and human experience and theology minor. And the reason I kind of have that conglomeration of all these different majors and stuff and minors is because I'm super interested in the public health space. And when I found dealing with people in public health and working in communications and stuff, they all come from very different backgrounds. I think that's where sociology comes in. A lot of religious and cultural identifications come in. So having this background has been really helpful and great in this field. And specifically, patient advocacy is an area that I would like to go into one day. And I chose this internship because of a personal connection to ALS. My mother passed away from ALS when I was a freshman here on campus, and I had to deal with being a young caregiver while I was both when I went home for breaks and stuff. It was not a break. It was like way more work, a lot of stress. I didn't have people that understood even what ALS was. Um, and it kind of bothered me because it was like, how can something that's so big and impacting my life be something that people don't even know like what it is? And I kind of knew in that moment that I was like, I don't want other people, especially people that are younger than me, to feel this way and feel like they don't have a space to go. And I tried to look for resources for people at my age at that time. So I was 18. And it felt like I was either too old for certain resources or too young for other ones. And it was really annoying because everyone was looking at me saying, you can understand this, you're old enough, but also babying me sometimes. And neither one felt right. So I knew I kind of wanted to make a difference in that world somehow one day. So my role at Hope Loves Company, or HLC is just the acronym is, was mostly communications, media, creating a young adult program was like my main goal, and creating a content library and collecting all of their previous works that they've had. And I connected with them by cold emailing and just LinkedIn messaging. I knew this company existed because I previously worked with a company called Kesem, which does camps for children whose parents have cancer. And I knew that existed. So I kind of looked to see if anything similar existed in the ALS community. And that's how I found Hope Loves Company. Pretty much one of the only ALS nonprofits that's not really focused on fundraising and more so focused on support and community building for children. So I knew they were the people I wanted to reach out to. I actually just emailed the CEO, Jody, and it was founded in 2014. And she immediately called me back and was like, yes, let's connect. And she was really helpful there. So just a little about HLC. I know I kind of already spoke to this, but they provide emotional support, community, and resources. So very communications based. Everything kind of has to do with meeting the kids and people that are involved where they are. We also have programs specifically for parents. So maybe the other parent is facing an ALS diagnosis, but they don't know how to navigate now parenting while their children is dealing with this. So those are the main focus groups that we're based around. And who it serves is the kids, teens, young adults, and the families that are involved. I will say young adults wasn't like a big thing that they focused on originally. That's kind of why I think they were excited to get me involved, but it's because I knew I wanted to include that and make it a bigger deal in the company, at least bring a little bit more attention to it. But their main focuses before they started expanding were retreats and camps and peer support, education, and they also have care packages called Hugs of Hope. So you can sign up completely free. You'll get usually Jody wrote a book and it's a book about like navigating the ALS diagnosis, like what it's going to mean and how it might affect your life. Much more kid friendly than a lot of the scientific documents you're going to get and stuff when you Google ALS. And then we just send them things like a bracelet making kit, just, a little bit like someone's here for you in the mail. And that was one of their big things. So yeah, they're really focused on a population that's overlooked and navigating something that might not feel like you can navigate. I'm gonna pretend you know what that says on top.
Move it, like you can.
I know, can I?
Click on it. Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to like mute myself. Oh, no.
Try about more.
More. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, so why this work matters. ALS is emotionally and socially isolating. I also speak to this for any rare disease. It can be really hard to find a community of people that either agree with you or know what you're going through. And then because rare disease is so unique, even if you find people that are going through it, there's usually something that's different. People have different funding, people have different access to home care, or being like some kids may be affected by the ALS, but they're not a caregiver. Or the opposite. These kids might be the main caregiver and they're navigating it because their other parent has to work all the time, or so on and so forth. So having a group where they can go to and just get that support that they need is super important. I also just like to mention that youth grief is often overlooked because grief is very like stigmatized, especially when it comes to younger kids, because it's not the most common to lose a parent when they're young. So other kids their age might not understand that or have a community that they can go to. And a lot of times they might just not want to go speak to another adult about it. They might want to speak to someone that's their age, or even that goes for young adults too. Like I've had a lot of people come up to me trying to relate when they're like 60 years old and have had like my parent just passed away, and I'm like, it's a little different while I'm 20 years old trying to navigate this. And that met me with a lot of times where I felt like I was comparing people's grief or traumas, which was a different thing to like battle itself. And that's something we all address kind of while we're here. Also, lack of mental health support access is just through timing, being again, rare disease. A lot of people have a hard time finding time to just have these groups of mental health support, navigating their insurance whilst also navigating the insurance needs of the person going through this, or so on and so forth. So we like to provide as many resources as possible. And then nonprofits also are just filling systematic gaps. So they do come with their own struggles, but a lot of nonprofits are ran because of a purpose that people are driven by. So these obviously fill areas where there's useful stuff. And I think one of the biggest things I realize is that there are major gaps in support systems, even research wise. If you're trying to like motivate something or create something, a lot of times you need research to back it up, or like, why do we need these things? Even when I worked for Pfizer, and I was helping them build a community for caregiving for cancer, children that are caregivers for cancer, they were very big on like, okay, we need documents to back this up. We need research scientific papers, which is not great, but at least cancer, there are some history and there's a lot of research on it. For rare diseases, it can be way harder to find those resources. So that's where I realized having nonprofits like this are super beneficial, because they might fund those resources or find people that are in need of that or want to do that research. So a lot of the people are also unpaid volunteers. Majority, there's not many full paid workers. I bet there is about 10 that are paid. The other ones and people that come to the camp and work and people that come on different Zooms and all these different programs are usually volunteers. We'll cold email them and say, hey, we've heard you speak at this conference, or you're a neurologist. Would you want to be interested in coming to this program and learning about this? Or you work for this school. And that was a lot of my work, was reaching out to people and saying, would you want to participate in this? Would you want to be on a young adult panel or be on this retreat? And so that was a lot. Oh, because I clicked that other thing again. Okay. So structural and social changes. Something that I really wanted to highlight was limited funding. which limited a lot of programming. So I tried to a lot of time mention how kids now, especially, and even like our age and younger, are not the biggest fan of online Zooms, especially for things that are meant to be like calming or retreat, because it's kind of reminds them of school, or it can be like another assignment for them. Not the most exciting thing in the world, but obviously with limited funding, we don't have access to being all over, especially with HLC being countrywide or nationwide. People come from all different places, and so we obviously can't meet up in one space, which was a big thing that I had to understand. Again, mentioned the small staff, so everyone in this nonprofit is wearing a million different hats, and that's kind of normal for every nonprofit that exists. Reliance on outreach was a huge one, and that kind of has to do with boundaries itself, because you don't know when people are going to reply to your email. And if you let that slip by, you're maybe not going to get them into your programming. So it kind of did feel like I was turned on 24/7, which was a little bit tiring, but paid off usually when it came to the events themselves. We also just have the overall emotional labor of caregiving. A lot of these parents or these kids already deal with this 24/7 in their lives. They don't always want to come to a retreat and talk more about what they're going through. And that became something that we really wanted to navigate. It's like, how can we make this more of an emotional space where they can open up to their peers, but it doesn't feel like they're being forced to come here as like another form of this is something you need to do, which was a huge thing that I wanted to try and get them to do it. And I said, like, from a sociological perspective, my biggest thing was understanding how structural issues and like such as funding and staffing are kind of what directly support an organization and like what they can do with that money and funding. So that was a big reason that I feel like so many people were wearing different hats and focusing on different timings. There's also not always time to implement changes or different projects. If there's something else going on, they might not always be like, okay, well, let's do this and implement it first. And that goes directly also into the different stigmas that we're also focusing on. So a day in my life as an intern here, kind of as Liz mentioned, all of these were different varied days for me. So a lot of the work I did was definitely not busy work, which I really appreciated. I wasn't just going in and filing stuff. It felt like everything I'm doing or continue to do, even if I don't continue working for this company, will carry on and help them build to be a more clean or organized, even if that's just one thing. So like I mentioned before, one of the biggest things was writing outreach emails. We had a retreat go on about the weekend before St. Patrick's Day, where for 2 days, so the Saturday and Sunday of the weekend, we had a bunch of people sign up and come in, and it was essentially a 2 day online retreat for these kids. We had different programmers come in, different mental health counselors. We had like a yoga section, all of this stuff, which I helped implement, which was really awesome. And we obviously needed a lot of people to come to that. So we did that as well. We also did have a program where we wanted to outreach to a lot more neurologists or schools in regards to the book that Jody wrote, who's the CEO, and talk about that. So we had a book event as well. Planning events was also a big one. Obviously, had to help with planning of all those events and just help things go smooth. And they really did enjoy, at least my boss specifically, really enjoyed having that sociological perspective. I think she really took that to heart when I like went in and said, I'm here for like a practicum. And she really liked me introducing how there might be different barriers to groups and access barriers and all of that, which was kind of nice to talk through and share with an organization that might not always have a background. Not everyone there has, the same college degree or major. So also creating surveys and forms for after all of these events, working with leadership teams, and I just recently, my most recent project was creating a digital library. So essentially, anytime HLC was mentioned anywhere in the news in the last 12 years, I collected pretty much all of that, and now there's a program or a folder on their website where you can kind of go see different medias and stuff. We're currently still working on and actually just made our first date for our young adult retreat program, which is really exciting because that's kind of what I came here to do. And that's going to be my goal is to make it like the most casual as possible. I want people to create their own like group chats out of it. I want it to be really chill. So we're going to see how that goes. in the next week. I believe it's next Monday. I'm excited for that. So kind of as I mentioned, example projects. One of the things we highlight too is beyond the bunk. So while we do have the summer programming where kids can sign up and go to this sleepaway camp for a week, there's also the option to do beyond the bunk, which is online. It's about once every 2 weeks, and there's different age groups for it, where you can meet different people, have emotional check-ins, learn more about HLC. We have a parent-specific one too, which Jody usually hosts so that she can talk to people about what HLC is, the mission, and if they want to get involved. And then, yeah, we just started a new young adult group, and I think we're going to actually try and see if people want to get involved in the more leadership side as well. So that's our next goal for them. And yeah, that's kind of my most recent projects. My impacts of success, I did, like I mentioned, created real materials that were used by the organization. I helped expand outreach a lot because I gave them my network, my personal ALS connections, people that I've learned from or seen that work in different nonprofits. And they did have access to those as well, but I was able to get them some younger people that I think they could really benefit from. So that way I contributed to the youth programming. I definitely supported a lot of engagement initiatives and definitely created a smoother media collection, as well as tried to streamline a lot of their communications in general, introduce them to different ways of communicating and like grouping more simple ways of communicating. And I think the most rewarding part is that my work was actually used. I've definitely been places where it's just, okay, like here's some busy work, and I didn't want to do that. And yeah, that was definitely nice to not have that. And then what I learned about myself was definitely, oh, well, this is also like sociologically included. I learned more about structural constraints. So like I mentioned before, not everyone is going to have access to computers. Not everyone's going to have access to time, I think is a big one because we're learning all about people have, maybe some people have a live-in nurse, maybe some people do not. Do they want to take to spend time? And I think I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Dealing with stigma and knowing that like while I'm in this place and I want to be in a leadership position, a lot of these people might not want to be, and they don't even want to like exist in this world, but they're facing it, or their parents are making them go, or so on and so forth. So meeting them there. And then inequality in healthcare access was a big one. I mean, doing this internship at times where we're losing a lot of funding in the ALS community in general is dealing with a whole different side, and then having to put on that brave face and be like, no, this is like, we're going to get through this, and try and be that support circle still, because that's what HLC is kind of about. And it really just confirmed for me that I want to work in spaces that combine healthcare and advocacy. Even if it's not nonprofit, I know eventually I'd want to work in advocacy of some kind. I just think it's super important, and not a lot of people do it. I do think a big thing that I'm trying to like get around is people that work in advocacy usually have around 20 years of like work under their belt. Pretty much everyone I've ever met that works in patient advocacy. And a lot of them tell me like, well, you should wait a little longer, get more experience. And part of me is like, I think we have this gap because that doesn't exist. And I think that's really important to navigate. So that's something I definitely learned about myself, is challenging norms. And as well as I also gained definite communication skills. As Liz mentioned before, definitely setting some boundaries. I was explaining to Gwen before I came in here that my boss definitely likes to work late hours. I would get a lot of emails at like 3 a.m. and stuff like that, which created some kind of communication difficulties because I was not awake at 3 a.m. But I was able to kind of advocate for myself and be like, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's the work I have been doing, and I'm doing it well. How can I like help and be more beneficial to you if it's not working for you? I think for me, I gained a lot of experience doing professional writing, a lot of confidence gaining, especially with public speaking in a panel setting to younger people, whilst also being really sensitive of how they might be feeling. That became a strong suit for me because I had to speak on a few panels, and I think that helped me a lot. Okay, and then yeah, my final reflection was that it just showed me how important community and support systems are for anybody of any group. how important it is to kind of be a voice for people that don't really want to have it, um, or don't have the capacity to have it at the moment. So that's kind of my final thing.
I have a question, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I'm wondering emotionally for you, how is it to involve yourself in this work, having such a positive
Yeah.
relationship?
I enjoy it for me. And I think it became a really interesting because I've talked to a lot of people about this, where it's like, how often do you think working in something like this is more avoidant than it is helping? And the interesting thing about ALS is the anticipatory grief. So you like know it's coming, like terminal disease, you know, like it's gonna happen. So for me, it's having the experience felt like I gained like so much wisdom. And so I was like, I don't want to have this mean nothing. Like it happened to me. I've always been someone that's like, it is what it is. As that sounds so like, but I'm like, what can I do with it? And how can I help other people that are going through it? Because it's not going to stop as much as we'd love it to. But yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I think that's what it is for me.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think you do such an awesome job carrying yourself through this.
Thank you.
And it's great. I just want to say thanks.
What addition, like, I'm trying to think of how to say this, but what other like programs or jobs would you want to do that would keep you in this
Yeah.
space? Like, what other places would you want to go?
I think for me, it's having a combination of looking and seeing that like this nonprofit work is great and it does so much, but there's so many limitations. It's like, how can we introduce this into a world that's something like pharmaceutical? And I found that really nicely in Pfizer with the way that they worked with their oncology patient advocacy group. And they would work with Pfizer essentially directly to be like, here's the nonprofits that need help and need these resources. What can we do? And they would work with Pfizer and give them all these things. And that's something I think I'd be really interested in because it's almost like providing these nonprofits with grants and stuff that they need. And I would love to do work like that with working and finding people that need that funding. But yeah, that's kind of my biggest area of interest. If not professionally, I definitely continue to do volunteer work. I think the volunteers are such a impactful part of being in any nonprofit organization, even if it's just like going to the camp for that week in the summer. It's so needed. So I think that's important.
What programs did you model the new youth retreat program also?
So the new young adult retreat program is more so based in like programs I've been a part of. So just in my head, I'm like, I want it to be more of a group chat. Like I even said to her, I was like, I don't know if a lot of young adults are going to want to join a Zoom and meet each other for the first time and be like, here's all my trauma that I've been going through over the past so and so forth. It's more so just to find people that have something in common enough where they know, like, yes, I want to talk about this normal thing, but also just so you know I have this going on in the background and you actually understand what that is. So that's kind of what I mostly modeled it after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you mentioned public health, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in public health. So I was wondering, like, would your focus be like you mentioned like the advocacy part of it?
Yeah.
Or like the mental health aspects, like it's different ways to like go about public health like in relation to.
Yeah.
So I was wondering like what's your like focus with the public health?
For me, I definitely looked at a few different things. I think medical communications is a huge one for me in the world of public health and possibly implementing policy eventually. I know I'm someone that will, if I'm going to ever get my public health master's, would want a little bit of professional work first, just to figure out directly if the MPH is where I want to go, or if there's another world that I can enter and get more education. So yeah, I guess that's like a cop-out answer, but for me, I'm like, I want to get more experience to find out exactly where I go in that world.
Thank you.